could be disassembled, gems could be infused, and magic spells or enchanted attacks could be recalled from Ashley's tortured and fragmented memory. At its release, Vagrant Story was not compared to Final Fantasy titles because its vague relation was not yet realized, but several elements made the action-adventure stand above its contemporaries. Its script was a vast improvement over Tactics. It delved into religious tones that Square previously extinguished when localizing its games, and the comic book-inspired art style was a departure from other fantasy projects on the PlayStation. Six years after the release of Tactics, gamers were taken back to its ever-transforming realm in Final Fantasy Tactics Advance in 2003. With the exception of Matsuno and Sakamoto returning, the design team was new to Ivalice and to Final Fantasy. The never-ending story of Tactics Advance was quite different from others in the saga. It told of 4 children, Marsh, Ritz, Moot, and Donut, who lived in the quiet mountain town of contemporary Saint Ivalice, each with their own insurmountable set of hurdles. After stumbling across a battered book that turned out to be an ancient magical tome known as the Grand Grimoire, which was a prominent item in Vagrant Story, the children fabricated a fantasy world based on their personal challenges and boundless imagination. Advance harkened back to a number of conventions introduced in Tactics. The maps, locales, and graphical touches were basically in the same style as the original, but the battle and job systems were also similar with some minor or distinct changes. Tactics Advance introduced Ivalice to a number of new races that would become mainstays of the realm: the reptilian Bonga, the mystic Numu, the spiritual Viera, and of course, friendly Mughals. Instead of one circle of jobs that all characters could choose from, each race now had their own circle that comprised its own selection of unique jobs, as well as variations on previous standards. Like in Tactics, some jobs became available after certain conditions were met, and different abilities could be swapped once they were mastered. The battle system retained its turn-based roots, subtly incorporating aspects of the new job improvements. Movement and order were still a major tactical factor, as well as the positioning and timing of abilities. The most significant change in the pace of battles was the inclusion of laws that restricted various abilities that could be used in each encounter. Each skirmish was presided over by a judge, who maintained the laws of the battleground. Laws varied and could range from being a simple nuisance to an incredible hindrance. Characters that broke the laws of the engagement were warned, and if multiple infractions occurred, penalized or even jailed. Obeying the laws and staying on the favorable side of the judges awarded characters with judge points that could be cashed for a number of different uses. Eventually, with the help of the haughty know-it-all Ezel, players could combat the iron fist of the judges with law cards and anti-law cards. Law cards allowed players to add laws in the hopes of restricting enemy abilities, and anti-law cards canceled out existing law cards in play. The only areas of Ivalice that remained free of the judge's jurisdiction were dangerous zones known as the Jagd, which is German for the hunt. Upon arriving in Ivalice, Marsh was met by the Mughal Mont Blanc, who introduced him to clans and their respective wars. Marsh had the option to name his clan and help it to grow and prosper throughout the course of the game. Rival clans often challenged him for supremacy and competed in various tournaments. The clan itself consisted of all the characters the players had amassed. Different members could come and go as the missions were completed, and be dispatched on singular missions for loot, items, and other spoils. The world map of Tactics Advance was certainly the most malleable of the series, allowing for the player to customize the landscape with different area icons. Placing specific areas near others occasionally unearthed treasures that could be plundered by searching the zone. Cid played dual roles in Advance, first appearing as Moot's father in Saint Ivalice. As an unemployed drunk, his persona was a polar opposite from his position of Judge Magister and husband to the Queen, when the kids made the crossover through the Grimoire. Tactics Advance also introduced the world of Ivalice to a number of mysterious otherworldly guardians, first known as Totema. In addition to the pantheon accessible by the traditional Final Fantasy summoner, the Totema were powerful beings that could be called forth to damage all enemies on the battlefield. Each race had its companion totem that could be summoned when a character attained 10 judge points. These games showed followers of the Final Fantasy franchise yet another world to absorb, one that was stacked with plot layers and hidden connections for those that persistently played all three. But for those that dismissed them as spin-offs, and bypassed Final Fantasy XI for its multiplayer sacrilege, only one thing mattered: the true single-player follow-up to Final Fantasy X. Unbeknownst to this impatient army, the release date of the next core Final Fantasy, which started development in 2001, would be delayed a series record 4 times. This created a development gap of 4 agonizing years, the longest fans ever waited for another installment. Matsuno was originally assigned to direct the project, but bowed out in the summer of 2005 due to health reasons. Gamers waited and hoped. Final Fantasy XII was released in Japan on March 16, 2006, and crossed the shores to North America in October of the same year. Although Final Fantasy XII's Ivalice was most similar to the Ivalice in Tactics Advance, the majority of the design team from the original Tactics and Vagrant story returned. Matsuno's duties were split between Hiroyuki Ito and Tactics art director Hiroshi Minagawa. Akihiko Yoshida designed the characters, and Hitoshi Sakamoto composed the score. Series legends Yoshitaka Amano and Nobuo Uematsu had very little to do with 12, contributing basically the title logo and theme song, respectively. Told through the eyes of the bright youth Vaughn, 12 followed the plight of the dethroned princess Ashelia Dalmasca and her pilgrimage to reclaim her birthright and right the wrongs inflicted upon her homeland by the ever-expanding Arcadian Empire, led by the aging Emperor Gromms and his ruthless, power-hungry son Vayne. After the murder of her husband and prince of a neighboring kingdom, Ashe went into hiding under the guise of suicide. When the Empire eventually captured her kingdom of Dalmasca and Vayne was appointed consul, she chose to hide no longer. Vaughn and his surrogate sister Penelo embarked on a number of misadventures that put them in the paths of the foppish sky pirate Balthier, his Viera companion Fran, and the disgraced Captain Bosch, who is believed to have assassinated Dalmasca's king Ramenas over the fateful treaty signing with the Empire. Eventually, the upstarts joined with the resistance led by Ashe's uncle, the Marquis Ondor, ruler of the opulent sky city of Bujerba. In addition to his opposition to the Empire, Ondor was also responsible for compiling a collection of memoirs that served as a structural narration throughout the progression of 12, similar to Al-Islam's role in Tactics. 12 also sported a number of supporting, non-playable characters that had detailed and well-developed personas and intricate backstories. Among them were the Little Lord Larsa, heir apparent and younger brother of Vayne, the steadfast Judge Gabranth, Bosch's zealous twin brother, and the swashbuckling Redis, notorious sky pirate and patron of the town of Valfenheim. In a reversal from his usual helpful nature, Cid was one of the party's many adversaries in 12, as a megalomaniacal scientist responsible for building Arcadia's airship fleet. Two of 12's system breakthroughs were truly milestones for the series.